USC is coming to Washington. Time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen to the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, it is time for our favorite show of the week. We're going to be getting into some keys to the game for this Washington USC matchup, which is here in Seattle for the first time in a month for the Huskies, which is just great. We love that. So, as the everydayers know, we're going to get into our bold predictions at the end, your always accurate score prediction. We're going to get into some defensive keys to the game, but as always, for anybody who's new, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. As we love doing this. We really do. We always start on the offensive side of the ball, and it's pretty great. Lars, first offensive key to the game here.
So I'm gonna borrow yours from last week because we gotta mix it up a little bit. For the everydayers, all the keys. It's like whoever wins in the trenches is always gonna win on Saturdays. If you score more points than your opponent, you're gonna win the game. All right, cool. We're done with the show. We're done with the show. Cool. That's a record show. No, but first key here: establish the run, and that means establish yourself in the trenches. Establish whether it's Keleki Latu or Suwannee Fasolo. Personal opinion, kind of not sourcing this, but just wouldn't be surprising if Keleki Latu got the nod this time.
I agree.
Out there would not surprise me. Not saying Suwannee's bad, but I just think Suwannee will certainly get in. But I think Keleki has earned the right over the last 3 weeks to get that nod. And we've seen him come in on those first scoring drives against Iowa, against Indiana, and make an impact. And I think that's why this kind of all ties together, is if Keleki can kind of lead that line and say, you know what, guys, we just need to be badasses. We need to be tough guys. We need to really assert ourselves early on here, because USC is kind of a finesse program. They're not Iowa. They're not Indiana. They're not Penn State. They're not Oregon. And so for me, it's if you can establish yourself early and grab that line of scrimmage and control and get up early, that's the key one right there.
So, Lars, I love that you started there, because that one's really important. And another thing that, plays into that is third down offense. The third down offense has been awful this season. It's 36.9% conversion, which is sitting around number 100 in the country right now. And that's something that, we talked about it with Jedd Fisch on Monday. And one of the things he said was it's all 11 players and it's us on the sidelines. It was really refreshing to hear him say that, because he says, we need to maybe call some better plays. We need to find ways to do things a little bit differently. So that's the number one thing that I'm interested in this week. And it's not just because that's one of Washington's biggest areas of improvement that we need to see. It was something I wrote about over on Huskies Wire, but it's also because USC's third down defense has been one of the best in the nation this year. They're inside the top 20, allowing, I want to say it's like a 31% conversion rate, something in that ballpark. And when I look at what this USC defense can be when it's healthy and it's clicking on all cylinders, it can certainly get after it. I'm still not completely sold on the pass defense, which is one of the worst ones in the Big Ten. I think it's 14th. But I look at this offense as a whole, and I say, all right, if you can find a way to stay ahead of the sticks and pick up third down conversions. Lars, here's an interesting stat for you. In Washington's 4 losses this season, all 4 of them, they converted under 35% of their third down attempts. In all 4 wins, it's been, the lowest one was 44%. So I'll say 40% and up has been that key mark for Washington to hit. So I'm really going to be watching these third down conversions closely.
And that honestly kind of feeds right into the other point that I would make, which is this is going to be an interesting stat, but like a kind of important one. The average time to throw, the time that the ball is in Will Rogers' hands, should be under 2.5 seconds. That ball needs to be out and going, whether it's to Jonah in the flat, Adam Muhammad, Cam Davis, or whatever the case may be. Spread the wealth out. Like when you talked about USC not having the best passing defense, stretch them out, go wide. And I'm not saying 4 or 5 wide, the old air raid or that sort of thing, but I'm saying make him go sideline to sideline, because on those first couple of drives, if you're stretching him wide, that opens up the run game because now USC thinking, great, now we got to go sideline to sideline, and then now we got to also defend the pass and the run.
Yeah.
So everything works in tandem.
Sorry, no, I love this one because the more I think about it, where last week running under center worked really well against the Indiana defense. I love this idea because Jonah is able to pick up yards in space. He's really good after contact. And I think this is the perfect kind of, scenario for that. If you get them in nickel, get them in dime, and just say, all right, we're still just going to run inside zone, and we're going to, give Jonah the carry on a draw, whatever it might be. I think that's a really great way to churn up yards on the ground and stay ahead of the sticks. And, if you're doing that on, let's just say it's 2nd and 9, I feel like more often than not with Jonah, who averages close to 7 yards a carry already, that could be a really effective way to, get into 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, or even pick up first downs from that point on the field. Because that's something that we want to see anyway is, you talk about establishing the run. It's, will Jonah Coleman get 20 carries in this game? I'd kind of like to see that.
I mean, I think I agree with the principle in terms of give Jonah ample reps and opportunities. But the one thing that Jonah, you kind of alluded to it, he doesn't need 20 to get 125, 150 yards. It's like that's the crazy part about Jonah's game is he can hit you for 3 or 4 big ones. So if he has, let's say, 2 or 3 of 30, 2 or 3 of 20, and a couple of 15ers in there, already you're looking at near 100 yards on what, 8, 9 carries?
Now again, is that before?
And that's what I'm saying. So it's not real. It's not Ashton Denty crazy, which is 250 and 5 touchdowns and that sort of thing. Not that Jonah can't, but Ashton Denty is just different, and that's no shot at Jonah. That's just, I applaud Ashton for staying at Boise State because man, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Would love to know what that number would be. But anyways, beside the point. Speaking of numbers, it gets back to that's why the number doesn't have to be big for Jonah in terms of carries. It has to be efficient, and that's why I think we've seen times at times in the season where Jedd will kind of run Jonah, and so you get 2 yards, -4 yards, 6 yards, and it's like, okay, where's the big 8, 9, 10? Jonah was averaging I think 8.7 per carry over the first 5 or 6 games. And now it's dipped into below, I think, 6 or 5. So still you're getting 5 yards. This is more than 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But it's like, okay, if Jonah can get open on, or get, hit some of those big ones early, give Cam an option, give Adam Muhammad an option, because there's so many guys in that room. I'm talking about Cam Davis that that you can make things work. And so I don't think necessarily like if we look at the end of the game, we kind of saw it a couple of times at Arizona where he could have a huge amount of carries and they don't win the game. Sure. Or you could have, let's say 12 carries for 105 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Right.
That is a much better stat line.
So I agree with you, but one reason I say that when it comes to Jonah as a whole is because I think, especially if you can get him going early on, like I said a little earlier, this USC pass defense is nothing to write home about. I know they got a couple injuries in the secondary. I'm curious to see if all their guys end up playing back there, what it might look like. But on top of that, if you're able to establish the run early and get Jonah going the way that we know he can because we've seen it, it opens up a lot more in the pass game for Will Rogers, for Denzel Boston. It makes things a little bit easier on the offensive line at times when, all of a sudden they're expecting run and a bunch of the linebackers to drop out, whatever it is it might be. But I just like that matchup for this offense. And if you can establish Jonah early, you can get into play action. You can get into all these other things that will make life a lot easier on Will Rogers and this entire passing offense, which is something that is going to be really, really important. But Lars, the defense is also going to be really important against a really solid USC offense. Let's jump over to that side. We'll get that right after message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy, because our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else gave me a bit of Husky fan fuel this week? I said it yesterday, but I got to say it again because I'm so excited that the Huskies are back home at the greatest setting in college football for the first time in almost a month. It's going to be loud. It's going to be rocking with Nate Robinson as the honorary captain. It's going to be a really, really fun game. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with the 5-Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. So, Lars, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, what do you think the number one key for this Washington defense is going to be?
Real quick, shout out to Nate Robinson, one-time former UW quarterback. But with that being said, also just glad that Nate's able to come back home and try to get that off my chest. But speaking of defensive performances, things that need to happen, what's the one thing that throws off a Lincoln Riley offense? It's not necessarily getting sacks, as we've alluded to. It's throw Miller Moss off his timing. Just get Miller Moss out of his rhythm. Don't let him get in rhythm. I think, and knowing that USC, similar to what Wazzy used to do, similar to what certain offenses do, you're going to give up points. You're not going to hold Lincoln. As much as we love Steve Belichick and the defense and all that stuff, Washington pitching a shutout. Okay, I mean, if they do, I think Lincoln might be on the tarmac at SeaTac by the time we're done with this game.
But that $90 million buyout, I'm not so sure about that, but I like where you're going.
But right, exactly. That obviously, again, to be clear, I don't think Lincoln's going to get canned because they literally can't afford to. Like that. Right. For everybody throwing that out there, that's not going to happen just because of the money involved. But with that being said, if you can get Miller Moss off his timing and almost a recipe of what you did in the Pac-12 championship against Oregon last year, set them back, throw them off their timing. And again, I'm not comparing Bo Nix to Miller Moss. I'm not saying that, but to the principle of allow your defense to kind of get active early so the offense can get ahead. We talk about scoring early. Well, how do you capitalize on that? Whether you get the ball first or not. I know you're a big, hey, we want the ball first, we're going to score. How'd that work, by the way? Can we run that one back one more time?
Sure. Well, so hold on. First, I'm not a big ball first guy. I liked it in that sense to see, all right, let's see what happens. And it didn't work. So that's on me. I will wear that one. No, I like where you're going with that. The number one thing I want to see in this game is kind of in line with that, with throwing Miller Moss off his timing. I want to see a lot of man coverage. This USC receiving core has some nice bodies in it, but one thing I really like about this Washington defense is its ability to play man coverage. So my thought is, why go away from your strength? Why would you do that? We haven't seen an offense like this that can throw the ball, honestly, all season. And I say that with all due respect to Indiana because it was Taven Jackson. If it was Curtis Rourke, I feel like this is a very different conversation. But we look at what that USC offense has been all season. They pride themselves on throwing the ball. And we'll get to Woody Marks because that's one guy where I would be concerned about the way he's able to run. I know he's a really talented player, but I'm curious to see how Lincoln Riley is going to use him in this game. I feel like it's going to be very game script dependent. But that being said, I also I'll get there. But when I look at this Washington secondary, I think they have the bodies to stick with Zachariah Branch or whoever else you want to say, because that's always the name that pops out to me first. I don't know if they have the long speed to stick with Zachariah, but with the technique and everything that John Richardson has done this season with this defensive backs room, I think that they have the length and the size to play suffocating physical coverage on these guys and find a way to, as you said, Lars, take Miller Moss off his timing.
Do you put EP or that on Zachariah? If you could pick one or the other.
That.
Because of the physicality?
Yep.
Good man. But no, I also know what's great. I said you were saying that. So Miller Moss, average time to throw 2.4 seconds.
Sure.
Will Rogers 2.5. So for all that Washington's been bad on the offensive line and time to throw and all that sort of stuff, you can get to Miller Moss, which also kind of establishes one other thing. Forcing turnovers. Use the production. You don't have to get a sack. But you do have to create some possessions. And because, again, for this Washington offense, special teams ain't going to do it. Offense ain't going to create another possession. Now, how else are you going to get another possession? Somebody on defense. And we've seen them be able to do it at times. We haven't seen it super consistently. Again, context matters for the most part because you're facing 6 running teams at the start of the season. But, again, there was opportunities to be had that picks could be had.
Sure.
Didn't come to fruition. This is the game where if you're looking at Efi or you're looking at Thad or you're looking at Cameron Sard, somebody on that defense, there should be at least 1 or 2 picks this game. Just because if you're going to go back to the 22-23 USC game, what happened in that game? Again, different rosters, different everything, right? But but the principle applies. It was a back and forth game.
Yeah,
and 1 turnover changed that whole dichotomy of the game.
Sure.
That's what I'm driving at.
I get what you're saying. Where that I feel like that might be a little bit different, just in terms of because remember Washington also had a turnover in that game. That when they could have gone up by 2 scores on that interception over the middle of the field. I hate that I have just that particular recall for this particular play, but one thing that I'm going to be watching closely is, Lars, the number one thing we discussed yesterday for the defense, and that was the pass rush, where you talk about 2.4 seconds to throw. I want to see how that'll work with this Washington pass rush, which is going to be without Zach Durfee. Jedd Fisch announced on Thursday that he's not going to play due to probably the turf toe that he's been dealing with in both feet, which every time I say that, I still just kind of like, that just must be insanely painful. So there's going to be no Zach Durfee in this game. And I don't want to say that I'm necessarily looking for one guy to step up, because we know it's not going to be one guy. We know it's going to be a committee. I'm just curious to see what the snap share is going to look like between, I feel like Voight Tanufi is going to end up as the starter on the other side of the field with, D'Anton Lynch. What's his usage going to look like in this game? What's Lance Holtzclaw's usage going to look like? Are we going to see more Jacob Lane? Are we going to see more Jaden Wayne? What are we going to see? And when I say that, I'm thinking about all the plays in particular, but particularly on 3rd and long, where USC has been pretty solid on 3rd down. But when I look at Washington's defensive front, I think that especially from that NASCAR package, they've done a really good job getting pressure consistently there throughout the season, where it's just a look that it doesn't seem like a lot of teams are used to seeing, even when they're prepared for it on film. So if you're in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and we know Steve Belichick is going to bring out that defensive front, I want to see it get after the quarterback consistently. I think it'll be Voy in that, in that role at the 0. But outside of that, I feel like it can be very interchangeable, and I'm just curious to see who's going to step up.
Yeah, I'm looking at Miller Moss's pressures per game in terms of how many times he's been pressured per game. Like, you just look at this, and it's like, this is what's so intriguing about the defensive front, because, you mentioned go from Voight Tanufi to Jaden Wayne, Jacob Lane to D'Anton Lynn. There's so much different variables that you can throw in, which also makes me wonder, how much does this safety play a role in this? Because early on in the season, we saw Cameron start to walk down more. Haven't seen that as much of late, which I think, to be fair, they were kind of getting burned on that at times, especially on 3rd down and deep and 3rd and distance and things like that, which is the final key here. Get off the field on 3rd down. Like, if you have a 3rd and 9 and you're able to, hold them to 5, get off the field, whatever it is, because those drive extending plays have been what cost Washington's defense. Okay, like if you look at Indiana, that again, Indiana did a good ball control job, but all those drives of 6+ minutes, go back and look how many of those had 3rd down conversions on. Decent amount. Now, was Indiana like 9 of 12 or 15 of 18? No, they weren't insanely good on 3rd down, but they were good enough, and certainly better than Washington was offensively. So if you can get off the field, I think that's kind of the trade-off here. Either get turnovers and flip the field, or get off the field, which is basically just as good. And, again, Denzel will call a fair catch and not do anything. And, the offense will start at the 15, and we'll call it what it is. But, at least it gets the ball back without any points going on the board.
So I like where you're going with that, because my last thing on the defensive side is, as I alluded to a few minutes ago, I really want to see what this run defense is going to look like against Woody Marks, where I think that the lack of bodies at defensive tackle, especially after the Javon Parker injury, has loomed larger than we might have discussed, I want to say. And this is a team that, when you think about Lincoln Riley, you don't think about him saying, all right, I'm going to grind out this clock, I'm going to run the ball on every single down to try to, have a 9, 10, 11-minute drive like Indiana was able to. So with that being said, I think that if you're able to find a way to stop the run, and especially if you find yourself down by 3, let's say, in the middle of the 3rd quarter, late in the 3rd quarter, yes, you need to find a way to get off the field, but you need to be able to do it by stopping the run. You can't let Woody Marks be the guy that beats you. If you want somebody to beat you, let it be Miller Moss. And I don't say that, with any disrespect to him. I say it because that would be Lincoln Riley's greatest strength against what is the greatest strength of this Washington team in the nation's leading secondary in yards allowed. So when I look at it, I say that's a group that I want to trust in that scenario.
Exactly. And also you look at the fact that Miller hasn't really scrambled that much. He's only had one scramble the entire season. So yeah, it's again, if Miller's going to beat you, it's with his arm, not with his leg. So it's like you have everything right there in front of you. You know the game plan. Jedd's favorite word. You just got to go out there and execute.
Lars, are you ready?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. All right. You know what? That works for me. Let's get into some bold predictions. We'll get that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And a couple just season longs that I really like. I'm still on. I think the Lions are going to end up winning the NFC. I go look at that right now on FanDuel. Jaden Daniels, Rookie of the Year. That feels like almost a lock at this point in time. We'll see what happens, especially after that Hail Mary. And then Josh Allen for MVP. I know Lamar Jackson's having a great year, but I've been so impressed with Josh Allen this season. I think he's got a good shot to win MVP. All right, Lars, I'm pretty sure it's my turn to go first this week in our bold predictions. Oh, it is. All right, let's go. So I'm going to double down on one that I had last week. And because I think that this is going to be a really good week for it, especially with the way I think the offense is going to operate in this game. So give me Denzel Boston 2+ touchdowns in this game. I'm a huge fan of his matchup in particular against the secondary, and I think that Will Rogers is going to look to him early and often. You know what? I'm going to go a full line here. Give me 8 catches for Denzel, 115 yards, and 2 scores.
Thank you. Always going to need a Denzel one in there at some point. So, as I told you before, shout out to our friends at FanDuel, you have plenty of player odds this week on FanDuel. For Washington and USC as well, but who cares about that? So
that's not why we're here.
That's not why we're here. That's not why I'm here. Will Rogers plus 250 yards is at plus 124. So we're gonna do a 3 parlay here. So Will Rogers over 250. Jonah Coleman, this blows my mind. 90 yards at plus 102. So basically everything is minus money until you get to 90 yards. So Jonah plus 90. And then for me, the other one I'm going to take is a parlay here that we're going to make real interesting. First drive result. I'm going to go offensive touchdown at plus 220. It's the second. It's the second best odds you're going to get, or second lowest odds you're going to get. The odds-on favorite is to punt on the first drive, which I don't want to do that. Just because it's all plus money at this point. But that would be my 3 parlay to kick this thing off.
I like that a lot. Where I especially like the first drive touchdown. I think that's a good one where we haven't seen Washington start hot. And that's really something we need to see in this game. And I feel like they have an opportunity to do that, especially if they throw the ball a lot early. So you took the Jonah one, the Damon Williams first rushing touchdown, which, we had gone back and forth on for a while, is now off the table. So I'm going to go with an anytime touchdown in this game. And I'm not going to go Giles Jackson. I'm not going to go Jeremiah Hunter. Do you know who hasn't scored a touchdown yet this season, Lars?
Adam Ahmed.
Keleki Latu.
Not too.
So I'm going to go Keleki Latu anytime touchdown in this game. I think of all the players on Washington's receiving core, he's going to end up having the toughest matchup where I feel like D'Anton Lynn is going to want to commit Kamari Ramsey to covering him a decent amount. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. And I think in the red zone, there's going to be one fade ball in the back corner of the end zone to Keleki Latu.
I mean, we've been clamoring for that for months now, because we saw it so much in fall camp, and it was with the amount of fade balls we saw in fall camp that are not what's the ratio you think of fall camp fade ball touchdowns to either one of Giles, Denzel, or Jeremiah versus what we've seen in the season? What's that ratio?
Well, we've seen maybe 2 fade throws, so
30-1, 40-1, 50-1, something insane in that ballpark. So you left this one open for me, the one that I basically said. So I'll go right. This will be my last offensive one. Adam Muhammad gets his first.
I like it.
Rushing touchdown.
I like it. I'm here for that one. All right, let's move over to the defensive side. I'm gonna go with Washington gets 4 sacks in this game, and I'm gonna get really particular here, where I'm gonna divvy them up. I think Lance Holtzclaw gets 1. I think Isaiah Ward gets 1. I think Sebastian Valdez gets 1. And for the last one, I'm going to give it to a combo of Voy Tanufi and Deshaun Lynch. So I'm getting really particular, really bold. I feel like that should count for extra if there was anybody out there who kept track of this stuff, because we definitely don't. We are terrible at that. But I would go 4 sacks, and that's how specific I'm going to get today.
To be clear, we keep track of our wins. We keep track of when we're right. Like the whole where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. We don't acknowledge where we're wrong. We just
No, absolutely not.
We just keep moving. So I'm going to go on the defensive side here. And we alluded to it a little bit. You know, there's going to have to be some turnovers of some kind. I will say that UW has 2 turnovers, forces 2 turnovers in this game. One of them will be an interception. And the one person who gets the pick, Thaddeus Dixon.
Okay. All right.
I was debating between him and Prysock, and I was like, well, the way that I see it is almost setting up like Mish Powell against Arizona State, where it's like, hey, you know what, we're gonna.
So I'm glad that's what you said, because as soon as you said that, I was like, all right, I can absolutely see Thad jumping some just kind of stop route. So I like that a lot. All right, so I'm gonna leave the standard tackle prediction to you this week, especially because mine hit last week. I'm just going to point that out there. Speaking of where we were right, mine did hit. I had Alfonso Tupatalo leading the team in 8+, and he had 14. So let's go. Taking that, calling it a huge win. Man, I have a whole bunch written down here. Sack one I already used up. You took my turnover one. I was going to have 2+ interceptions with Thad and Jordan Shaw getting the 2. That's another one we haven't, we like and haven't gotten to yet. So you know what I'm going to say? This is going to be not necessarily bold in terms of stats, but I think with the way this game is going to end up playing out, I think we're going to see the high, and this is something that I've seen some people talking about on Twitter, is why hasn't Washington gone to this, playing more young guys approach and seeing what they have building blocks wise, which you and I will probably get in more of that, over the coming weeks, but it certainly is. Washington wants to be bowl eligible. They want to give themselves the best possible chance to get there, which certainly includes some of these upperclassmen. So I think one guy who is going to be a really important building block of this team for the next couple of years is going to be Lance Holtzclaw. And I think we see him get his highest usage of his career. I don't have the snap count in front of me, so I'm just going to say we see him play 20+ snaps in this game.
I like that. So, I mean, I'm gonna do the total tackle one right now because I like that one. This is an interesting one because part of me thinks it's either going to be a secondary player or a linebacker. I don't want to run back Alfonso 2 weeks in a row because, again, it's becoming it was a good bet last week, but I think this week it almost seems like too safe of a bet. So give me Cam Brassard.
Okay,
Cam Brassard, and you know what? I'm gonna parlay this one here a little bit because I have a feeling like it's gonna be one of those 3-way tie situations. So give me Cam Brassard, Carson Bruner, and Voight Tanufi each have 6 tackles.
I like this. So you know what? I lied. I am going to give a total tackle one because I think that this game is going to go in a very different direction than that. And we'll get to your score prediction. You'll see what they have there. So if you have one more defensive one, I've got one here. All right. So last bold prediction then. I say the team's leading tackler is going to be Kamori House. I think that just the way this game is going to flow with the personnel that Washington's going to deploy at times, I think we're going to see a lot of Alfonso Tupatala up near the line of scrimmage, playing some edge, playing that outside linebacker spot. So Kamori House is going to be back there roaming, and I think that we're going to see him. I'm going to go 6+. I'm going to keep it nice and modest. I like where you're going with that. But I think that of those leaders, Kamori House is going to be one of them.
Man, like the thing is, like Kamori's been that guy throughout the season who's come on, made the impact against Washington State. Really been like, we got to go back and find that episode from before the season started, because we both talked about Kamori, like, hey, like this might be the guy that plays like every single game this season. And said about Adam, said about Kamori. We got to find somebody go find those receipts for us because they're there somewhere.
That'd be helpful.
So that kind of lead, I've been going back and forth on this because, again, as we both said, this was a game before the season that we both picked Washington to win. I believe, correct?
I picked them to lose this game. You picked them to win.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I will maintain my pick. The problem is, again, there's not a ton of conviction because I'm now 1-1 in picking losses, right? Or when I pick losses. So we'll go back to picking wins for a bit. Maybe try to speak this one into existence here. Give me Washington 34.
Ooh.
USC 30.
Okay. All right. I like this.
Because I'm not a big fan of the USC minus 2.5, but I also don't think any team wins this game by more than a possession. So that wherever that possession comes into play, I don't know, but it ain't going to be that much.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say USC is favored by 2.5 in this game. So shout out to our friends at FanDuel. I like that pick a lot. Where as everybody knows, I don't do score predictions because I'm the world's biggest jinx. So I'm going to hold off on that. But I like where you're going with that, because the way that this game could work with the way Washington strengths match up with what USC wants to do and vice versa, I think, especially being at home for the first time in a month, I have a good feeling going into this game. That's all I'll say at this point in time. And Lars, with that, you got something? Yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, there's no way a Jedd and Lincoln Riley game ends under 30.
That's fair.
Ends under 25 at least. So it's like 30 seems like a safe. I think the over under is 52, 55.5. So take the over. I almost would stay away from the points. I would just say take the over.
Lars,
if you want to save money, take that.
Oh, absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first. When everyone else overlooks it, you can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And with that being said, if you like everything that we've got to offer, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the game.